Hello everyone, welcome to yet another live stream teaching session. My name is David, and we'll be playing, as the title suggests, 10 plus 0 chess. 10 minutes plus 0 seconds each move, meaning that there's no increment each move we make. And, well, I'll leave you guys to ponder about the solution of this warm-up puzzle, as I usually do, while I make sure everything is working with the live stream. Puzzle, as I usually do. Okay, sorry about that. Let's pause this. Let's do the testing, as usual. Making sure those live chats are active. And that's it. Okay, well, hopefully that was enough time for you guys to take a look at this position and hopefully figure out the answer. This one is a little bit trickier than it initially looks. So obviously, if you guys haven't figured it out, I recommend you guys to pause the live stream / video. But essentially, moving on to the solution, we are faced with two options, and that's actually the first step to realize that we have only two options, not only one. And I'm assuming that if you guys thought you had only one option, that would have been the more natural looking f takes e5 check. Why is this more natural? Well, I guess it's because it's a check. It's more forcing by definition, and that's what I was doing for the first 20 seconds while looking at this myself. Now, that's where many of you will go wrong. Before you go into calculating this in depth, which can be complicated, you have to realize you have at least an alternative, and that is f takes g5. So how do you go on and ultimately find the solution to which one is better than the other? And that is simply calculation. You have to calculate the pawn race, or the king race, I should say, which ultimately turns out into a pawn race, as we will soon see. After f takes e5, king takes e5, king takes c5. Obviously, now it all becomes about whether this pawn or this pawn on a5 promote first to their to each of its promotional square. And the answer to that question, just to make things a little bit easier for you, is we are too slow. King e6, king b4, king f7, king takes a4, king takes g7, king b3. Already here we can sense things are going wrong for us. Because it's white to play. Let's say white moves the king away. a4, g6, a3, g7, a2, g8. And okay, well, this happens to be check because I put the king on b3. Let's say I put it on b4 all those moves ago, like 4 moves ago. But even then, we would be maybe promoting, not winning, because white already promoted. So at least that's a draw, not a win. Therefore, not the answer. If anyone is going to win, by the way, it's probably white, because white is taking on h5, and we have to make the draw in that case. So in short words, f takes e5 doesn't work. The pawn race is won by white. Now, it's either f takes g5 or nothing. I mean, if it's not f takes g5, we're in big trouble, because maybe this is just a wrong position. But let's calculate f takes g5. f takes g5, this is very appealing, because now we've rejected the only other logical move. So we are kind of a little bit more confident about this one. f takes g5, let's say white plays h takes g5, very natural recapturing move. And the idea is that we start pushing our passed pawn immediately, h4. We've created this h passed pawn. And after h4, let's say, how many options does white have? Well, I mean, white can try to stop it with the king, or this way. Or they can start pushing, trying to promote one of these two pawns. I don't think that one works. f takes g5, h takes g5 once again. Let's say we go h4. If they go e6, we go h3, e7, king d7. And even if white tries to sacrifice the other pawn, it just doesn't work. Sorry about that. King takes e7, c7, king d7. Those two pawns can protect each other, but they can't force a promotion by themselves. They need the help of a king. So once again, f takes g5, h takes g5, h4, e6 doesn't work due to h3. Now white is obviously not in time to stop the pawn. They should have done that on the previous move if they wanted to stop the pawn. And ultimately black is winning because there's nothing that stops h2, h1. And there's in those two moves, I don't see white creating enough counterplay with the king, for instance. So let's do it for one last time. F takes g5, f takes g5, sorry, h takes g5, h4. Let's try king e4 this time. And now this is faced with another problem. Let's say we go h3, king f3, forced move. This is the only move. And then we're going to go king takes c5. And why do we do this? Because after king g3, king d5, king takes h3, king takes e5, sure, this is still equal material, but take a look at the difference between both of those kings. I suspect that black would be winning in that position, and maybe we can take a look at that in the analysis after we get this right, hopefully. So f takes g5 is correct, h takes g5, we are going to go h4, and that is the answer. Now, when you're solving Lee chess puzzles, this is not the end of your learning exercise, let's say. When you get a check, I mean, this is the equivalent of being in an exam and you have like 4 options given to you and you choose C and it happens to be right just because of pure luck. I mean, maybe not directly equivalent to that, but there is some essence of that into Lee chess giving it as correct in this position in particular. Why? Because there's still many moves you have to find accurate moves to win this game. For instance, after king e4, black has to find h3. King takes c5 happens to win, but I think it transposes. King f3, king takes c5. Okay, well, the engine, you can move the pawn and you can take this king further away. It usually doesn't, the time you spend moving the pawn and sacrificing it is the time you could have also taken the pawn. So it's, I wouldn't, yeah, this is once again a transposition, but you ultimately have to find the idea of taking these 2 pawns and understand that even though this is equal material, black is completely winning. Let's try some lines. For example, king g4, we go g6, and here you get to see the, I mean, white can prolong this as long as they want, but then ultimately we're going to get to a position like this, where black plays king f4, this is opposition, and ultimately Zugzwang, black is putting white in Zugzwang, white has no more good moves left, they're forced to move the king, and concede the pawn, black is winning in that pawn endgame. And for example, if they play g6, obviously this is very bad, that's dropping the pawn immediately. If they try king h4, you can play g6 equally, and even though you could argue this is an improvement on the previous line, where it was white to play in this position, black can play king e4 with the opposition either way. So ultimately, to explain this in short words, although this could be its own live stream in itself, because king and pawn endgames are a massive part of chess. But ultimately, given that black's king is more active than white's king, and given that the pawn is more weak than our pawn, and I should have highlighted that in the opposite way because red is more likely to be weak, this is winning for black. So 2 reasons. Black's king is more active, white pawn is more weaker. So once again, we get to a very similar position. Let's try king g3 this time to exemplify that. Ultimately, white wants to go with king h4 to defend this, but yeah, it's not to no avail. Okay, well, thank you. What am I saying thank you to? Hello, good evening. Hopefully everyone's been having a decent day. Today we're going to play in the arena tournament, and we will see if I can find redemption to reivindicate myself from yesterday's live stream. Yesterday's live stream was horribly time managed, but the games were very instructive, hopefully. I mean, I would like to believe. But yeah, grab your popcorns / water bottles or like coffee. We're gonna ultimately play 3 games, hopefully. And I'll be walking you through what I think on each move. Let's see who's leading the arena. Anonymous players. Okay, we're gonna get a game. We're playing against an 1000 rated opponent. We're playing with the black pieces against Kirill. Best of luck. And I feel like I'm forgetting something in the technical front. So if you guys think I forgot about some technical. Okay. We'll leave it like that. No, Kirill didn't make a move. Okay, that was a quick win. We gained 1 rating point out of that. Pretty good. We'll be playing 1e4 with the white pieces and 1d6 as the black pieces against anything. Our repertoire has been pretty solid with 1d6 and pretty active with the white pieces, as most openings are. Okay, we're gonna step up the difficulty here. We're playing against an 1800, and now we're playing with the white pieces. We're gonna open up with e4. Black plays g6, very modern way of playing. Against g6, we have against most of modern openings, white has a choice, a wide range of setups. White can go for setups with d4, let's say bishop g7 and f3. Actually, I'm going to play d4 first, and then I'm going to walk you through those options. But d4, very logical move, obviously, occupying the center. And black plays bishop g7, indeed. If they had played knight f6, already you have to consider e5, so that's why black plays bishop g7 rather than maybe knight f6. They usually play knight f6 after d6, once they've stopped e5. But okay, back to this, bishop g7. And as I said, white has tons of setups here. Like there's bishop e3. Obviously there's knight c3. Many of them transpose into each other. But all I'm saying is, the way you develop your minor pieces affects your future plans. If you develop your knight to f3, you're essentially saying that this pawn is going to stay on f2 for a while. If you want to castle queenside, you're essentially signaling that you're going to go for some sort of kingside attack. If you castle shortside, maybe that leads into more positional lines. It's all a variety of approaches, and I'm going to choose bishop e3. This is known as the 150 attack, in particular once white plays knight c3. And bishop e3 is a flexible move, but also a very dynamic one. The idea is to play queen d2, knight c3, and castle queenside. In fact, knight c3, just for good practice, although there are some lines where white plays queen d2, but we're not going to talk about that. For the sake of good practice, you should always develop knights and bishops first, and then queen and castle queenside. So knight f6, I'm going to play knight c3, defending this pawn. And black castles shortside, interesting. So normally, as I said, I could have already played e5 here, but because I played bishop e3, now knight d5 gains some strength. So that's why, one of the reasons why I played knight c3. I decided to protect the pawn. But now I get e5. That's why I think black should have played d6 in this position. Maybe we can talk about that in the postmortem. Because of shortside, I'm going to play e5. And black is going to be forced to play knight e8 or knight h5. But knight h5 runs into a tactical move that wins material immediately. Let's see if you guys can spot it. So black goes rightfully knight e8. If knight h5, I would have played g4, and that's the end of that knight. So knight e8 played by my opponent, and all of my opponent's pieces are very passive, except the bishop, I guess. It's also a very funny position. The only piece that has crossed the first 2 ranks is this pawn on g6. That's how you know this is a very passive position for black. It can't be that good. Now, what should we play here? So once again, we have gained that, what I mentioned now. We've forced black's pieces to be very passive. But what has black gained in exchange? It seems like nothing, right? Well, you would be wrong. Black has gained the fact that my pawns are closer to their pawns, aka overextended, and that makes them weaker. And if that makes them weaker, it means I have to spend more time defending them. If I have to spend more time defending them, that's annoying. I have to like make moves like f4, not f3, and you know, maybe I don't want to go f4. Maybe I want to go queen d2 and bishop h6, keep this diagonal open. But because this is a weakness, I have to compromise. That can't be good. On that note, I think I want to go for not f3. I don't really want to go f4. I think that makes my position weaker. It creates holes in my position. So I'm going to go knight f3. Very natural developing move. I'm expecting black to play d6. And they do so. And now let's think. D takes e5, is this a threat? I mean, obviously I'm not losing the pawn because after d takes e5, bishop takes e5, knight takes e5, this is essentially what this knight is doing. But I would be allowing the queen trade. And to be honest, I'm not actually scared about that. I can take with the rook, and my pieces continue to be pretty active. Now, I don't think that's a threat, but I do think black is threatening bishop g4. Bishop g4 would be indirectly putting pressure on e5 now that this knight is pinned to my queen. So bishop g4, if I play this bad move h3, bishop takes a3, queen takes a3, d takes e5, d takes e5, bishop takes e5, right? David, in that sequence, black played 2 moves in a row because it's almost as if black played again here, bishop g4. You're right. I should have said, let's say we skip a move with a move, neutral move like a3. Then they go bishop g4, h3, bishop takes a3, queen takes a3. You get the idea. Now, all of that said, I'm going to play h3, prophylaxis. David, what does prophylaxis mean? That's just it's a more intimidating term than it seems. All it means, in short words, is preventing what your opponent wants to do. Stopping them from, well, in this case, putting pressure against e5. Okay, my opponent ultimately goes for the queen trade. I think that's probably a good decision by my opponent, but it doesn't change the fact that my opponent's pieces are still a little bit inactive. And this last move I don't like, bishop f5. First of all, I think black should have played knight c6, putting pressure on e5 immediately. Once again, this is what the whole point of these modern systems, to say, look, white, come here, so I can attack you. And by playing bishop f5, it looks like black is doing exactly the same, but then we're going to use Sam Shankland's principle yet again. If your opponent's threatening something, one of the first things you should think, or the first thing you should think is my opponent actually threatening that? What if I allow it? So by playing g4, we're going to actually allow black to take that pawn. And you're going to see why I think this is not an actual threat. I don't think bishop takes e2 is a threat. And we're going to get to see it. Probably better would have been bishop e6. But bishop takes e2, when you take a look at this bishop, it doesn't have many squares to go to. That's why tactics are always very important. You have to learn how to calculate first, and then maybe you can talk about a little bit more about strategy. It's all a balance. Let's not go into detail into those talks. But my point here is, you don't truly benefit from knowing strategically what to do. You may have played bishop f5, my opponent may have played bishop f5 by asking themselves, what is white's main weakness? And c2 is the main weakness. It's also a very natural move, like developing the bishop. But then tactics. Chess is 99% tactics. After rook d2, bishop b1 is not possible because the knight is keeping an eye on this. In fact, this knight is keeping an eye on 2 of the key squares. 3 of the key squares. So a lot of heavy lifting by the knight on c3. So bishop a4, bishop e4, and bishop b1 are all running to the knight. Bishop d1 is obviously incorrect. Bishop f5, for the same reason we played g4. That is not possible. And bishop e3. A takes b3. If my pawn was on a3, then black would be simply a pawn up. So these tactics are very important. Black plays c6. I think black should have tried knight c6 instead. And actually, we can maybe ponder here for a while and think, well, bishop c5 is more accurate than rook takes c2. As they say, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. The threat is stronger than the execution. And it's true in this case, too. So the threat is not, this bishop is not going anywhere. It continues to be trapped, so that's why I played bishop c5. If I had taken on c2, I would have allowed knight d7, and I would have been completely winning either way. But by playing bishop c5, I'm potentially winning a pawn, on top of winning the bishop. So now, can we go greedy mode and play bishop takes e7? I think we can. And I'll try. But actually, ultimately I won't. Bishop takes e7, I think rook e8, and okay, it looks a little bit dangerous. My king is still on e1, e5 is a little bit weak, so I'm going to take this for now. If they play knight d7, only then I'm going to take on e7. But they go rook e8, and this is what I wanted. Now I get to play rook d2 back, and continue to prevent knight d7, so this knight on b8 is stuck. It's stuck on b8 for a while. They play b6. Where should we put this bishop? On a3, keeping an eye on e7, the weak pawn on e7. But then there's danger of c5, locking this bishop useless, rendering that bishop useless, I should say. So I'm going to play bishop e3. Another point of this behind this move is that against a future knight e6, this bishop is what we call umbrellaing, or it's like a fan. This knight is, if you have a bishop two squares away from a knight, this bishop dominates the knight. It's always like that. So yeah, this is the ideal square for this bishop. I'm just going to speed up. We do have a little bit more than 2 minutes, but let's not repeat what happened on the last stream. Yeah, you can play the arena. It's the public daily rapid arena. Thank you. I've played for a little bit longer than 12, approximately 12 years. So I'm going to play a4, black plays e6. You can see my opponent speeding up, which is a very a very serious strategy. Once again, I'm going to reference yesterday's live stream where everything went wrong. Now I played king e2 because the last piece that I haven't activated is the rook on h1. So by playing king e2, I'm trying to bring it over here. They play knight d5. What should we play here? Obviously, you would like to trade pieces, but then I don't want to allow e takes d5. If I take here, e takes d5, and then there's pressure against d5. You know what? I'm probably going to. So my opponent's threatening knight d7 now. What should we do here? e5 is a little bit weak, so I'm going to play bishop d4. I can also take with the bishop, but I'm going to play bishop d4. I'm going to keep it very, very safe. I'm not scared about this check. I can go to e3 or to d1 or to f1. I can go all sorts of ways. They play knight d7. And I'm going to play rook e1. That rook is going to be defending the pawn on e5. Yeah, my opponent is finding some counterplay here. But we're in no rush. Part of the art of converting an advantage like this is to take it slow. And now we do have less than a minute. So let me just focus here for a second. Let's see if we can convert this. Okay, they go for this. I'm going to take with the bishop or with the knight. With the knight runs into, takes back, and I don't think we're... getting material. We're losing material, actually. So I'm going to have to go bishop e3. Obviously, I don't want to do this if possible, but I am creating the threat of knight takes d5 and bishop g5. On top of all of that, I think probably we're going to get some Wow, knight 65, knight 63 all of a sudden. Goodness gracious, my opponent is finding some counterplay here. So I'm going to have to take with the bishop to keep an eye on that. Knight 65, knight 63 was also working for my opponent. So all of a sudden my opponent is finding all of these good resources, but now my opponent goes wrong by playing knight 63, and ultimately things become much easier. We can take a look at that, but credit to my opponent for finding the most resilient way of playing, or what appears to be. Sorry, I can't say for a fact. Rook d4 is the most acting looking move here, but I think I can play something like knight e4, already threatening knight f6 ideas. Rook d1 also comes to mind. 30 seconds should be enough. And I think it will. We can allow bishop 63. That's a way of simplifying by allowing my opponent to... Well, yeah, provoking my opponent to take the material. Even though, as I said, we can give some material back for the sake of simplifying. I'm going to play knight e4. Now the threat is bishop f6. They play rook d7, so I can play knight f6, forcing takes. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6. And with two bishops and a super weak king in the dark squares, this should be game over very soon. For instance, rook 65, rook e8 ideas. So rook d6 would potentially be the best defense. Yeah, my opponent probably left the game. Not good news. Never understood why people leave the game. Yeah. It got interesting there for a second. I'm gonna do a little bit of the post-mortem now for the sake of time saving. What happened here is, oh, there we go. Let's be a little bit careful. My opponent may be listening to the stream. So after rook takes e5, back to the current position, the updated position. Rook takes e5, this is threatening rook e8. And yeah, the dark squares are so weak, this bishop is such a monster that even rook d8 is not possible. c4 is simply allowing me to deliver the last blow. And that is rook e8, followed by rook h8. Once again, this bishop on f6 doing quite a bit of lifting. Thank you for the game, Sirene. Let's take a look at that. So one of the first questions that we were faced with, I mean, not a question, but the amount of possibilities and setups you have here as the white pieces are enormous. You have tons of ways of playing. You have c4, you have f4, so continuing to occupy further space. If your opponent is not occupying space, yeah, you move pawns like that. That's very interesting. There's c3, there's f3. So if your opponent is going for a setup, white can also go for a setup. So for example, c3, knight f6, bishop d3. This is very solid. This bishop on g7 is now parried, neutralized because of white's strategy. This pawn chain is reassuring white a very solid structure. But okay, let's not go crazy on those lines. I go knight c3 and black should have played d6 here, after which we would have transposed into the usual stuff. Usually black plays d6 through this move order rather than playing knight f6. But it doesn't matter, it transposes either way. But as I said, castle short side, this allows a little bit of passivity. I don't know how to say it actually. It allows white to attack black and force them to go passive with knight e8. And now white is better. Now f4 happens to be the best move, and this is something I didn't want to go for because I thought I was a little bit paranoid. I thought of this, specifically this square on f5, and how this bishop was no longer eyeing the h6 square. I really wanted to keep ideas of queen d2 and bishop h6 alive. So that's why I played knight f3, but knight f3 is a serious inaccuracy. White is still slightly better, but white would have been much better after f4. Or bishop c4. Or even queen d2. Okay, knight f3, it's not such a big deal. Black goes d6, we play h3, white continues to be better. And d takes e5 is a mistake. Black should have played c6 according to the engine, or knight c6. After which, for instance, yeah, white plays bishop b5, d takes e5, bishop takes e6, and it gets tactical very quickly, but white is still dominating. But d takes e5 is breaking the tension too early. White's pieces are still very well placed here. Knight takes e5 as an alternative we didn't even mention, but I just sensed it was very unnatural. I think this pawn on e5 is doing a very good job at preventing this knight on e8 to get back in the game. And yeah, bishop f5 is not the best move. Knight c6 should have been tried, after which white has to spend one more move defending this pawn on e5, and only then have fun. So for example, bishop e6 and then knight d5, bishop b5, something of that sort. Bishop f5, yeah, bishop takes e2 is not a threat, so white gets a free move, you could argue. And that free move being g4, very forcing move, and bishop takes e2 is a mistake. You had to accept, swallow your pride, bishop e6, and yeah, I mean, continue playing. At least you're not down a bishop, but after bishop takes e2, you're down a bishop. And after this, it was pretty reasonable conversion. Bishop c5 is one of the top engine moves. Actually, it's the top engine move now. Bishop c5. So it was correct. What was not correct? Actually, no, all of this is correct. Bishop c4. They have to go back. a4, king e2. And then they go knight d5. Yeah, all of this is fine. Bishop e3. Yeah, this is all working. Bishop takes e5 was correct. I mean, the only reason why I think things went wrong is because after knight takes e5, all of a sudden white does have to find bishop takes d5. That's the only way, the only move that keeps this super amazing advantage of almost +4. So certainly there was a better way for white to play. And I think after e6, we should have already prevented knight d5 ideas. And how can we do that? Well, let's see. I think rook d6 is a very good way of doing that. Part of the reason why knight d5 is annoying is because after knight d5, black gets to play knight d7. But after rook d6, yeah, that's no longer possible. Now, bishop f8, there are two ways of going. You can simply go back to the normal position with rook d2, for instance. But I really like knight e4. Knight e4 is a tactical move that is... I'm sorry, a strategical move that is aided by tactics. And this is ultimately what you want in chess. Strategy is what you want. Tactics is how you do it. Strategy in this position is we want to trade pieces, but we want also to improve our own minor pieces, in this case with knight e4. So by playing knight e4, you're saying, David, look, you're sacrificing this rook. You're losing the exchange, but after e takes d6, we have two threats. We have the threat of taking the knight, obviously, and knight f6, and there's no way for black to stop both. David, there's knight d5 that's stopping knight f6. Well, bishop takes d5 and then knight f6. If there was no bishop on e3, the bishop had been on f4. Yeah, that's a very different story. So that's how important tactics are. It comes to little details such as that. If the bishop was on d2 or on f4, then the e file would be open, and if the e file was open, sorry, knight d5 would potentially be working. But yeah, all I'm saying here, once again, is tactics. Chess is 99% tactics. Okay. Thank you. How far are we from the very top? Yeah, we're pretty far away. Let's see if we can get a couple of games. Maybe we can aim for 2 more, which hasn't happened before, I think. We're playing against the 1600. Best of luck. We're gonna open up with e4. We get the white pieces again. Black responds with e5, the most popular reply. And we're gonna play knight f3. Against e5, we usually play the reversed Philidor in a tricky move order. And I'm gonna play bishop e2. David, that's not as active as bishop c4 and bishop b5. The Ruy Lopez bishop b5 and the Italian bishop c4. Why are you going bishop e2? This is passive. Well, it's getting the job done in the sense that I'm still getting ready to cast a short side. And sure, this bishop is definitely more passive than on c4 and b5. I'm not going to contest that. That's a fact. But on the other hand, it allows for interesting setups, and it allows for black to not be encouraged to play bishop g4 anymore, because this bishop on e2 is stopping the pinning of the f3 knight. Additionally, after bishop c5, we would play knight takes e5, knight takes e5, d4, which wouldn't be possible with a bishop on c4 or with a bishop on b5. Although sometimes with the bishop on b5 it does work, but okay. With the bishop on e2, certainly knight takes e5, d4 is working pristinely. They play knight f6. Here I can play knight c3, but that would be getting on the way of our Philidor structure, our Philidor setup. So I'm going to play d3. And now you get to appreciate my strategy. My strategy is essentially playing a Philidor, as I said already 1,000 times. I'm going to play c3, knight bd2, castle short side, occupy space with a4, after which black probably will have to stop that. And then ultimately prepare d4. It's very similar to the Gioco Piano variation of the Italian, where white is preparing c3 and d4 slowly but surely. Now black goes for d6. Black is treating this as a Italian themselves. So now I'm going to make a move that may appear anti-positional to some of you. And in a way it is anti-positional, but it has a very cool idea. And that is that with c4 I am weakening officially this d4 square. This d4 square is no longer at any reach of my pawns, given that my c and e pawn are already advanced enough that they can't obviously go back. You usually want pawns to protect weak squares. So after bishop g4, very logical move by my opponent, by the way. My opponent is already saying, look, this knight was the only defender of that weak square. I'm going to get rid of it, even if it means the bishop pair. Because the d4 weakness is such an important aspect of this game that it's worth giving the bishop pair away. And I would agree with that, actually. Now, should we go h3 or should we go bishop e3? h3, bishop 6 f3, bishop 6 f3, knight d4, let's say. I've seen in these positions ideas of the liking of g3 to threatening to save the bishop. And white essentially is threatening to go for, at some point, f4. So that's one way of playing. But I'm going to play bishop e3. And I have a reason. I have a good reason. The reason is that if black wants to go bishop 6 f3, I'm going to go bishop 6 f3. And now knight d4 is no longer as encouraged as before. Why? Sorry about all of this coughing, by the way. I'm still recovering from this nasty cold. But okay, knight d4 is discouraged because now I can take, obviously. And after takes on d4, this pawn can prove a little bit weak. And e5 ideas, bishop takes b7 becomes possible. So bishop 6 f3 does end up happening. Black goes for bishop 6 f3. I think black should have kept the tension. But okay, bishop 6 f3 can't be that bad. And then they go knight d4. So here we have the question. I mean, obviously the idea of putting the bishop on e3 was to take on d4. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't consider g3. g3 would continue to threaten bishop g2. But I think bishop takes d4 makes more sense. e64 only move, obviously. And now I feel like I have some momentum. Now I think we have this very tactical move. If we play strategically, positionally, if we approach this position, the static position, in a positional way, with g3, bishop g2, and f4, I don't think white has much, but after e5, this becomes very tactical. For instance, obviously black is forced to take. If they go knight d7, we simply take and take on b7 and we're winning a pawn, and I don't think black has enough compensation. I don't think black should do that. They don't have a good enough reason. So d65, we go bishop takes b7. Once again, very forcing, attacking the rook, so they have to move it. And the idea here was bishop c6 check. In order to stop, ruin, disconnect black's pieces a little bit before they castle short set. In fact, castling short set is not even a certainty. It's not guaranteed anymore. With this knight on d7, for instance, after move like queen a4 or queen g4, that knight would be pinned, and if black wants to castle in that position, that would be simply dropping the knight. So I'm going to play queen g4. This is doing two things. It's keeping that knight pinned and stopping castle short side, but it's also threatening queen takes g7. So something to think about for black for sure here. Now there's a problem in my position. I'm quite sure that some of you are already appreciating this pretty well. There's knight on b1. It needs a couple of moves, and my opponent plays something a little bit blunderish. But after something like rook b6, it wasn't obvious what white should have done. Obviously, if they simply move back, there's c6, and that ultimately allows black to castle short side, and black should be absolutely fine. So after rook b6, I'm kind of left with no choice but to take, and queen takes g7, and maybe we can talk about that in the postmortem. But okay, let's manage our time successfully. After castle short side, let's think. Do we want to take with the bishop or with the queen? I'm going to take with the queen, purely because it makes my life easier. It's trading the queens by force. So they take on b2. This is, I think, the most resilient try. I'm gonna take the queen. I don't see a reason I don't see a reason for keeping the tension, especially because black is threatening to keep the queen with queen b8. Not queen a8, but queen b8. So I'm gonna take that queen, rook takes d8. And obviously I want to take this knight out, but every single square is attacked by one of black's pieces. So I'm gonna have to spend a move with rook d1. Not a big deal. I'm gonna play rook d1. Now I'm threatening knight d2. And technically black could bother me with bishop g5 or bishop h4, creating a threat here, but those threats are gonna extinguish soon. So here I'm gonna stop bishop takes f2 with g3. Let's be aware of our opponent's resources. We're stopping bishop takes f2. Let's not relax. I'm expecting bishop g5, after which I'm gonna play h4, continue chasing that bishop down. And after bishop h6, I would have simply played knight a3 because this bishop wouldn't be in that diagonal anymore. So black goes bishop e7, kind of realizing that they can't keep track of both knight d2 and knight a3. So I'm going to go knight d2, as promised. And yeah, not only black is down a piece, which is the main reason why I'm completely winning in this position, but black is also very weak in the light squares. So like this knight is coming to e4, very nice square, or to f3. This bishop is very nicely placed on d5 potentially. And life is good. I'm going to play knight e4. So this knight is keeping an eye on the c3 square. I was expecting after some like, I don't know, f3 maybe. After f6, black wants to play bishop c3, but with knight e4, that's out of the question. And not only that, it's also kind of provoking f5, which is what I wanted. Because after knight g5... bishop d5 check becomes a major threat. And let's just to illustrate this as well as I can for you guys. Let's say black plays a6 or bishop c3 as my opponent did. And now I get this tactic bishop d5 check, forcing this king to move either to f8 or h8. And both of those moves run into some sort of tactic. My opponent plays king f8. And that is a fork 96. This is winning the exchange, winning further material. And here, I'm going to play rook a b1. I'm going to sacrifice this pawn for the sake of activating my pieces. I consider an active rook more important than keeping a pawn. And here, let's think for a second. We have c5 ideas attacking the rook indirectly, so we should keep that on our mind in case it's useful in the future. But for now, I'm going to give a check and go for those pawns. Although once again, it's very tempting to go for c5, c6 ideas. I just think it doesn't work. It's just playing for hope chess, hoping that my opponent simply forgets about the rook. So I don't see why going c5. I don't think it works. And rather than playing it in the hoping that my opponent blunders the rook, I'm going to play rook g8. This is objectively probably giving black a harder time. Rook takes g7 check, or even if g6, rook g7, picking up those pawns. After g6, by the way, I do see a reason why I should play c5. And that is that after g6, c5, that would be keeping this king away from these two squares, meaning that rook g7 would force them back to the last rank. And when you can, it's usually a good idea to keep that king as inactive as possible. King d6, very clever move, kind of saying, oh look, I blunder c5 check. King takes c5, bishop takes a2, but obviously c5, king takes d5. So obviously we're not going to fall for that. Instead, I'm going to play rook b1. Now, what is rook b1 doing? Well, I saw some lines with rook d8 that after king c5, I'm not quite getting that king. But now with the rook on b1, rook d8, rook king c5, rook b5 would be checkmate. But my opponent stops it. Okay, fair enough. I could play bishop f7 threatening c5, but they're going to stop it with c5 or king c5. So I'm going to simply take, I think. I'm going to take pawns. It's important to keep an eye on your opponent's resources, even if you're completely winning, such as in this position. The amount of positions I've lost that have been completely winning, and I say completely winning, there are too many. And it's one of those things that you would rather not learn in the hard way. But I think at the end of the day, you can't avoid these. Chess is a cruel game. I'm going to quote Victor Korchnoi because I haven't done it in a long time. For those of you who do listen to these live streams and learn from them, hopefully you're going to be aware of this. Oh, my opponent falls for a trick. But I'm just going to finish my Victor Korchnoi reference. I can play worse positions, drawn positions, slightly better positions, but completely winning positions I can't play. Goodness gracious, some of you must be sick of that. But yeah, Korchnoi said that. Very strong player, obviously, and it means you relax a lot when you're winning positions. Now, when it comes to winning, super winning positions, I think there's a limit to this. And my position is getting to that point. I'm going to play c5. This is unleashing the action of this bishop on g8 over the rook on a2. Obviously, this pawn was blocking that visualization, that targeting. So by playing c5 in a very forcing way, the most forcing way in chess, which is a check, I'm essentially winning more material. So yeah, my opponent resigns. Thank you for the game, Fernavg. Let's take a look at that and hopefully get one more game. So we play bishop e2, they play knight f6. What I was talking about at the beginning was if bishop c5, there's knight takes e5, and already white is much better. This is a typical trick. And the way I like thinking of this is nothing new. In the four knights variation as the black pieces, a very typical beginner mistake, is playing bishop c4 in this position, after which black plays knight takes e4, and d5. It's not a knight sacrifice. You're getting your minor piece back immediately. And you're going to say, well, they can pin our knight and they can take on e5. Now this knight can't take here because this bishop is pinning. But this is completely fine. Black is much better actually after queen g5. Queen d5 is also very good. But queen g5 I think is the best. And black is doing extremely well. So by playing bishop e2, this is essentially a mirrored version of that. Knight takes e5, knight takes e5, d4. But okay, black didn't fall for that. Knight f6, I went d3, and they go bishop e7. So bishop c5 would have been possible here, I suspect. And after castles, I think black should go for the principled approach and say, look, I'm going to occupy the center, even though you're playing weird moves. I'm gonna play natural chess, developing chess. I'm not gonna change my perspective of the game just because you're playing a weird line, and not change it specifically. And I say this out of experience because you're a titled player. Whenever I'm playing grandmasters, obviously I'm thinking to myself, oh, maybe I should surprise them with something else. But no, stick to your guns, stick to your repertoire, and stick to what you know. I mean, this is how you learn as well. Either way, bishop e7 happened, and this is also very interesting. Also short side, d6, and we went c4. This is the way you usually play these positions according to the engine. It's very double-edged because, once again, you are weakening d4, but in exchange, and I forgot to mention this, at least emphasize on it during the game, you're gaining quite a bit of control over the d5 square. You have a very big grip over that square after knight c3, knight d5. But bishop g4 happened. And here we play bishop e3, very logical, bishop takes f3. According to the engine, black should have kept the tension a little bit longer. And I agree with the engine, pretty conveniently. No, but in all seriousness, yeah, I was considering to play h3, so probably black should wait until white asks them the question, and then only then take on f3. It's kind of saving a tempo. But bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, knight d4. Once again, I think the engine liked something like knight d7 with the idea of knight c5, potentially knight e6, knight d4. So you look at this. d4 is the main basis through which black makes plans. So d4 is the hint of what black should do. And that happens in chess very often. In this case, I think it was more tactical. So obviously, if I was approaching this positionally, I would have gone g3, bishop g2, f4, and prepare e5, the pawn break. But tactically, e5 is working. Even though it's losing the pawn, it's gaining another one, and it's gaining some momentum. So now I either force my opponent to lose castling rights, which would have been equal, or knight d7, which is slightly worse than king f8. Slightly, but it's also equal. Actually, it's now leveled. Both of them are equal. So I take that back. But king f8 would have been technically not that bad because there's not much I can do against g6 and king g7. So that king is castling either way, at least manually. Now knight d7 does seem like after queen g4 it's not entirely obvious how black gets rid of this whole situation. And my opponent went wrong after castling short side, obviously. But I think rook b6 was worth a shot, and the engine agrees. Among g6 as well. g6 is possible. But yeah, for example, rook takes b2 would already be losing to queen takes g7. So this is part of the venom. Bishop f6, like this bishop is very well defended, but after bishop takes d7, black is forced to take with the king. Queen takes d7, queen takes f6, obviously. And then you take on f7 and things are not going well for black. So yeah, rook b6 I think would have been an interesting try. And after queen takes g7, there's bishop f6, bishop takes d7, queen takes d7 now that this rook is defending the bishop. But yeah, after the knight sacrifice, let's call it that way, things went a little bit rough for black. Thank you for the game. And yeah, I think we're not gonna get... Okay, maybe we can get one more game. So I'm gonna allow the pairing pool to pair me up with the next opponent. So they played d4. We're playing with the black pieces finally. We're gonna exercise a 1d6 repertoire. Once again, they play knight f3. I'm going to play knight f6. And now essentially it's already kind of official that black is going to go for a king's Indian defense structure. If they had gone e4, then this would have led into most likely a Philidor. But after knight f3, knight f6, c3, this is a more static, more positional game. But not for too long. Now, I mean, okay, it depends. I mean, if they had gone c4, that would have been the case. But with c3, what is signaling? What is essentially saying, look, this d4 pawn is not going to be a weakness. I'm going to keep things very controlled. And I'm almost completely sure that my opponent is going to go for a king, for a London system setup with bishop f4 followed by e3. And against that setup, you still go for this King's Indian-ish fianchetto, g6, bishop g7. They go h3, very wise. Against e3, black has the chance of playing that h5 and gaining the bishop pair, but they go h3 first. And yeah, what I was saying is, this is a very slow, very solid way of playing as white. It's very unambitious, but at the same time, very positional. And if you, I mean, I say unambitious, but if you're playing against someone who's not understanding strategy, then it's very easy for black to go wrong. For example, it's very easy for black to go crazy and start, like, I don't know, maybe go a6, b5, b4, and then that proves a little bit weakening sometimes. So I'm going to go b6, bishop b7, given that this bishop on this diagonal wasn't doing much. Like, for example, bishop f5, it's constantly potentially getting harassed with knight h4, and there seems to be no space, right, with the bishop on f5. But the bishop on b7 is nicely looking from far away, safely too. So I'm going to play knight bd7, castle short side, and I'm going to play rook e8. When you have these closed, well, very close position with low contact, obviously the first thing you should think about is pawn breaks. Now I have two natural pawn breaks, c5 and e5. c5, yeah, it's possible, but e5 I like more. Why? It gains a tempo, first of all, and it keeps the idea of playing e4. If I get to play e4, sometimes I get to launch a kingside attack. Every single time you have a pawn on e4 in these situations, you're by definition getting rid of the natural kingside defender. Getting rid of the natural kingside defender in turn allows, also again by definition, a kingside attack. I mean, it makes sense. e4 gets rid of the knight. If the knight moves away, the king is a little bit weaker, because one of the best defenders of the kingside is the knight, very often. It's the best friend, as they say. So should we go e4? In fact, that's why usually people take on e5 first. We got a game a couple of streams ago where my opponent took on e5. Okay, well, let's think here. I think I'm gonna go e4. I'm not gonna waste the opportunity. I'm not gonna allow white to take on e5. And you're gonna say, well, David, what difference does it make? Like, if you take, black ends up taking with the pawn either way, and e4 continues to be a threat. But things are different now. Things are different because now knight d4 would be possible. So it's not the same. If black could play, if white could play knight d4 here, then yeah, things would have been different. But okay, knight of d2, and here. So what does white play? I mean, white wants to go f3. This is, I think, what they want, but it's not very easy, because as soon as they play f3, e3 becomes weak after takes. So I'm gonna play queen e7. So now f3 takes, I'm taking on e3 with check. Very important. If I had played something like h5, which I think is a decent move too, after f3, taking on f3 runs into bishop takes f3. And I'm not in time. Very annoyingly, I'm not in time to take on e3 because there's bishop takes b7. And if I take first, white has both queen takes or rook takes, keeping an eye on e3. So queen e7 is getting rid of f3 ideas. They go a4. It's kind of obvious what this move wants. It wants to occupy and annoy me in the queen side. So I'm going to say no thank you. I'm going to play a5. Prevent a5. This is prophylaxis. Preventing what my opponent wants to do. And once again, it continues to be a very positional middle game. And it's not entirely obvious where each player's plans are. I mean, we've established already that we want to go for a king set attack, but how exactly do I do this? I know. So this is what I've come up with. I'm gonna go h5. So I'm doing two things. I'm keeping an eye on white's counterplay. I don't want white to break free. So I'm keeping an eye on that. I'm stopping f3. And as long as f3 is not possible, then I can do what I want. And what I want is h5, which is the second part of this explanation. This is why chess is difficult, by the way. You have to do what you want, but at the same time, you have to stop what your opponent's ideas are at the same, like, if possible, if the position allows you. And in this case, I think it does. I'm stopping my opponent, but then the second h3 may be ideas into the equation. So that's the explanation behind that. Okay, my opponent goes c4. And I don't like that move. I think it weakens b4. But at the same time, I get it. My opponent wants c5, so very interesting. Okay, well, whose plan is quicker, the c5 move or my king set attack? It seems like my king set attack is a little bit slower. So I'm gonna have to stop c5. How do I do that in the most efficient way? I can play bishop a6. But this bishop on b7 is doing a good job along this diagonal. So you know what? I am going to... Actually, I'm going to allow that. I'm going to go rook a8. I'm going to invite white to go c5. I don't think it's such a big threat. After c5, I can take. Take with the d pawn. If bishop takes c7, I always have rook c8. And if d takes c5, I have knight e5. And this rook would be immediately activated. I'm going to go knight b8 now. That seems like a very weird move. I think many of you wouldn't consider that move. But you have to sometimes take one step backwards in order to take two forward. And this is exactly what this is doing. Knight c6 with the idea of knight b4. This knight on d7 wasn't doing much anymore. So by rerouting it to the c6 square, specifically b4 ultimately, now this knight gains meaning. This is why I didn't like this c4 move, because b4 is now very weak. If this pawn was still on a2 and they could play a3, maybe this is fine. I'm quite sure white's position is completely fine here as well. But it does feel like white has to be very energetic in the queen side. If not, then I'm simply going to be able to enjoy the weak square on b4. They go queen b1, anticipating knight b4, but I'm going to go for it regardless. The only difference now being, obviously the queen is no longer under attack, so white gets a quote-unquote free move. It's very interesting. In these scenarios in chess, yeah, usually it's just transposing into whatever. Like, for example, if you wanted to go bishop f1 here, knight b4, queen b1 would have... Like, you could have got into that position either way. But okay, it's a good idea to be prophylactic. Either way, c5. Let's think about this. c5 makes my... potentially... my rook on the d file useful. So I'm going to take on d with dc. We're going to take with dc rather than with marvel. Not everyone would get that reference. Mainly because it's a very bad joke. But back to the chess. D takes c5 opens up the d file for my rook. And now I get knight d3. Bishop takes e3. And rook takes d3. Although you could debate for e takes e3 opening up this bishop. This diagonal for the bishop. I mean, easily this is the type of position I can spend tons of time enjoying the richness and complexity of chess and middle games and enjoy it, but then I would be losing on time, and that's not what I want here. So I'm gonna teach as much as I can, given that I have less than 2 minutes now. Good time management here. I'm gonna open up the diagonal. I can't resist. It seems like a very... a no-brainer. Like, there's no chance this is a bad idea. Rook c7, I did see this, and I did make sure that rook d7 was possible. If not, I would be simply losing either the queen or the bishop. So takes, and now we're left with this position. So what has happened? Things have changed. So what has changed? Well, what has changed mainly is that d3 is a little bit weak, but my bishops are all of a sudden alive. My bishops are much more active than before, and you're going to say, David, you blundered that. But I had an idea. And my idea was knight c5. My idea was knight c5. And even though I'm down a pawn, once again, the bishop pair usually goes hand in hand with attack. So all of a sudden this king can be a little bit insecure, but now queen b5, very good move by my opponent. Kind of forces my hand a little bit here because it's creating the threat of exchanging queens. If you're up a pawn, obviously exchanging queens is a good idea. But it's also attacking b6, a very annoying move. Good find. Queen d8. Is this something I want? I think I do. I'm gonna go queen d8. I do have to keep an eye on the clock. If knight c6, I think I have queen f6. Say they go for this. Can go bishop takes f3. Bishop a6 maybe? How do we do this? Bishop takes f3, bishop e5. Okay, I'm gonna go for that. I like the idea of damaging my opponent's pawn structure. Obviously knight takes f3 is not possible because of queen takes d1. I'm gonna bishop e5. So essentially I'm going all in with these with this forcing line. Maybe bishop takes d4 was better. Followed by queen g5 ideas. Okay. So now that this bishop is super bad, so I'm gonna take this guy. And I'm gonna go queen c8. I'm gonna go queen c8. Queen takes h3 is not a threat yet because my rook is under attack, but I will very soon move this rook somehow, somewhere. And I think I can exchange further pieces. You're gonna say, David, you're still down a pawn, but this bishop, as I said, it's not very good. Although I am underestimating some f5 ideas. Keep in mind, I am down. I am down a couple of seconds here. Okay, check. Yeah, d5 is a little bit annoying. And I'm gonna play knight d4. And this knight is heading to the ideal f5 square. I don't think I'm much better. I don't think I'm better, but I'm definitely not worse. Knight f5, this is a fork. Queen d8 I'm expecting. Okay, that's fine. I'm gonna take here. I shouldn't have played this. Maybe we could play queen e2. Or h4. No, that's a bad move by me. I should have maybe tried queen b4. I'm gonna stay quiet here. Threatening some queen e4 ideas. But also knight d4. Let's see. I'm scared of the internet getting on the way on this one. As I usually am, actually. But my blitz and bullet skills have been pretty rusty lately. I don't think the queen sacrifice would happen. Queen e4. Maybe I should have gone queen e4. Queen e7. Oh, there's some beautiful lines. Not sure if this is the way. No! That was so stupid. I don't know why I thought King F1 was forced. Thank you for the game, Stefan. I'm just looking at what was the way. You're saying, David, I mean, obviously you're not going to find something, but it's reasonable training. It's reasonable training to find the way here. So h3 here. I went for this ultimately. But with the queen on d3, obviously it's better. What am I doing? King h2, knight f3. And then queen d5. Oh, okay, that's not obvious. Isn't there a check, mate way? Made in 21. h3, king h2, only that one. David, you had a perpetual... I mean, yeah, but... I had to try. Why did I think King F1 was forced? Very good move by my opponent. I mean, psychologically, you would think your opponent is desperate for the perpetual. Horrible. Yeah. What about this? Ah, okay. Well, time management. What can I say? Either way, what was the middle game like? So everything is Syrian up until this point. Bishop f4, bishop g7, e3, knight h5 is one of the main lines, and it scores reasonably well for black. A whopping 45% actually. After bishop g5, so h3 is a very clever move. And then, yeah, all of this is very natural. I mean, we're following the main line. Now, b6 is not the main move. There's other ways. There's knight bd7. And let's say white sticks with e3. There are other ways of playing here, but there's also, I mean, you might as well transpose with b6. So all of this was normal. And then we go e5. And yeah, we got a very nice position. Queen e7 or a5, keeping the tension would have been slightly better according to the engine. But this is also it makes sense. It's following a plan. a4 was correct. But yeah, queen c2 followed by c4 seems to be giving black the upper hand. According to the engine, knight c1 and knight b1. Wow. Okay. Not sure what the idea of knight c1 is. Let's say black plays h5. Knight a2, let's say we play knight h7, and then b4. Okay, wow. So why can't you go b4 here? Because there's knight d5, I see. Knight takes e3, and then knight takes b4 is a problem. If queen b3, where's the tactic here? A takes b4. Ah, wow. Okay, not sure if I would have found that. So this is losing a bishop, so what? What is this? D takes c5? Black looks weird. I guess it's all about this bishop. Now I understand. Yeah, d4, like this is falling. Yeah. Okay, well. But that would have been pretty inhuman. Yeah, we played well. It's a shame. C5 here would have been stronger to stop C5 as a whole. But okay, knight B8 is anticipating it as well. And yeah, we were better. E takes E3, very, very correct as well. And here, we went wrong with knight E4. Knight E4 is wrong. Knight D5 we should have played. Which is very similar to what happened, but now we get better tactics. Like there's knight takes E3 already, actually. And rook takes E3. Bishop takes D4. And against rook takes E3, this is very typical. Obviously, if you move the queen simply, you're taking on D4 regardless. There's a very nice line, actually. Queen B5, you can take on D4 either way. Because there's mate. But yeah, I play knight E4, and while this still gives black an advantage, it doesn't. It's not as big as knight D5. So yeah, knight D5. I mean, I just completely missed this knight takes D3 idea. And here, queen D8 is wrong. We should have gone rook D8, and then there's full compensation for the pawn. In fact, a little bit more because of the bishop pair. But queen D8 allows bishop C7, and I completely missed this. Wow. Because the rook is hanging. That makes sense. But after this, kind of stabilizing. Although white is better all of a sudden. We should have played bishop A6, queen C6, and bishop B7 as accept a draw. But accepting a draw? I mean... No. I mean, we would ideally want to continue playing. So rook E7 maybe. So we went for this, and according to the engine, rook D2. So it wasn't that easy for white to exploit this. I mean, taking on E5 would have been a way. So maybe it was easy after all. My argument here was that after something like rook D5, black's pieces seem a little bit more active. Or white's pieces seem a little bit more tied up, especially because of this pin. Sorry. And yeah, after this, we're completely lost according to the engine, but king G2 doesn't make things better for white. I mean, that's putting the king in a more vulnerable position, actually. So F5 would have been strong. Making the most of black's inability to take with the queen, because there's queen takes E8. So yeah. And after this, oh sorry, this is not what happened. King G2. I should have played queen A8 according to the engine, but we went rook D8, once again allowing F5 and some complications there. But once the dust settled, we got a, well, I was about to say an equal position, but it turns out that black has to be accurate. Knight D3. Wow. Knight E6 is wrong. Why? Once again, because of F5. Okay, this makes sense, yeah. F5 would have been very strong here. It's all about activating this bishop. But after queen D6, we were forgiven very often in many moves. Queen C2 would have been stronger. Trying to come in over here. Yeah, I'm losing here, queen E8. Yeah, it was a bad game by me. I mean, this is the time trouble portion. I'm already less than a minute behind. And ultimately we got that position and we're completely winning, but... Knight D4 good move, queen F3 good move, queen H3 good move, queen C3 good move. And H3, David H3. Obviously king H1 is running into mate. And king H2, knight F3, king H1. It was difficult to see queen D5. And this is mate in 4. Queen E2, where's the mate in 4 though? Ah, knight G1. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, that's gonna be the tragic ending of that live stream. Hopefully you guys learned from the middle game though. I'm gonna call this one much better than yesterday. I'm not sure what I should call it actually. But it's tragic regardless. It's unfortunate regardless. If you guys have any ideas of the title. Oh, wait a second. Have we completely messed this up? Regardless. Not sure. But yeah, thanks everyone. Hopefully you found that helpful. And I'll be seeing you again either on Wednesday or on Saturday. I'm maybe actually a little bit busy on Wednesday, so we'll see. But yeah, thanks everyone. Have a good day.